Good afternoon and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association and Black Press USA's Tune In. I'm your host, Dr. Nisinga Burton, and I'm here today with Dr. Mark Cunningham, Associate Professor of Radio, Television, and Film at Austin Community College in Austin, Texas. Dr. Cunningham is an expert in Black popular culture, social media, and his area of expertise is on Black auteurs like John Singleton, film auteurs like John Singleton and Spike Lee. And today we're going to be talking about a lot that has transpired over the last days regarding this discussion of Blackness as it relates to social media and how those discussions impact various entities, most specifically the 2020 upcoming election. All right, thank you. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. All right. So, unless you've been living under a rock or you are a conscientious objector to social media, there was an incident that transpired over the last week involving Charlamagne Tha God, who is a radio podcast host, entertainer of sorts, and former Vice President Joe Biden, who may be president of the United States. He's the Democratic, the presumed Democratic nominee. All right, for the candidacy of president. I'm gonna get it going. Yesterday was a long day. So bear with me, people, for just a second. I just need a couple of minutes to get it rolling. And so during that broadcast, Charlamagne Tha God, who's also known, for people who don't know who he is, as kind of like a gotcha journalist. Like, he's the person who asks questions that most people will not ask because they think it's in poor taste. Or, for example, with Forrest Whitaker, who asked an inappropriate question about him. So he's that person who kind of goes there, so to speak, and came out of Wendy Williams's radio show, even though she doesn't acknowledge him anymore. Anyway, the point is, he asked him, about Black people who are voting for Trump or thinking about voting for Trump. Well, actually, he asked him, why should Black people vote for Trump? Vote for him, vote for Biden. And then Biden's response was, well, if you vote for Trump, you ain't Black, right? You ain't Black if you vote for Trump. So now that brought you all up to speed on that. Mark, Dr. Cunningham, can you talk to us a little bit about the fallout that happened after that in social media and some of the discussions that were being had?
Yeah, so, as we know, right, there's Twitter proper and then there's Black Twitter, right? and Black Twitter just erupted, right? Mostly very much so kind of disappointed in the fact, right, that, Biden made the comment about, as a white man, right, saying who's Black and who gets to be Black based on what they do or based on what their actions are. And that did not go over well at all, even among across the board, right, amongst people who are his supporters, people who don't support him, people who are on the fence, people who are Bernie supporters, just, Trump supporters, right, all across the board. It just did not go over well at all.
Yeah, there was a lot of backlash, a lot of discussion. Even on my Facebook page, there was like a very long thread of comments ranging from, you got to, get over it, you're focused on the wrong thing. A lot of people were expressing concern because Biden had not answered the question and has not answered the question sufficiently to them, despite rolling out a 21 page document on how he's going to help Black folks. So can you speak a little bit about the argument that some people are making that they just absolutely, Black folks and this is happening in social media. This is why we're talking to you in these public spaces. Can you talk about why Black people are saying that they can't or they won't vote for Biden, and really what that means in the grand scheme of things?
Right. Largely the discussion revolves around this issue of white privilege, right? Privilege as a white man to be able to say who gets to be Black or what determines Blackness, right? And certainly, right, also, kind of revolving around the discussion of this kind of understood idea that automatically the Democrats are going to get the Black vote. Right, kind of way. And so, really people kind of thought that, and certainly what people were discussing is that Biden, by making that comment, by saying, hey, if you are trying to decide between voting, for me or Trump, then you're not black. For him to say that, right, is this kind of understood, implies, right, that there's this understood notion that you're going to get these votes anyway. And so people were, alarmed by that. Black people in particular were alarmed by that. And of course, right, those who are allies or perceive themselves to be allies were unnerved by that, and really kind of really start kind of having these discussions around it, and really kind of started kind of talking about the fact that they need a better reason as to why they should vote for him, right? Unfortunately, as I would say, this late in the game, they kind of be asking that question.
It's problematic. It's problematic.
It's problematic. It is. It's probably, granted. Okay, and let's just go ahead and get this out now, right? Should Biden have said that? No, he shouldn't. But exactly. But we also know that he's notorious for sticking his foot in his mouth too, right? Yeah. And interestingly enough, right, about Biden is this kind of kooky uncle thing that he does, right? We thought what was endearing when he was vice president,
right.
Books written about he and I don't know, the detective novels, the children's detective novels. Yeah. He and President Obama, and those that kind of kookiness that he was the cool uncle with the Ray-Ban aviators and all, and now that he's at the forefront of the presidency, right, like now, right, it's not funny, right, and it's a problem, but and I talked about this before, right? One of the things I cannot stand, right, on social media is anytime there's something, anytime particularly a white celebrity, actually presents themselves as an ally or says something in defense of, Black Lives Matter or whatever it might be, the first thing that comes out of the black, I don't want to say black community like it's this monolithic thing, but the first thing that comes out on Black Twitter is so-and-so gets an invite to the cookout. I hate the cookout. I hate it. I hate it.
Why do you hate
the cookout? Because it's all talk and no action. You're giving them all this benefit and all this credit, right? Because they said the thing that they should have said to be on the right side of the issue, but nothing in their action, right, says that they get this imaginary invite to this imaginary cookout. And I get the spirit of it, but I'm not cool with it, because here's the thing, right? When you start doing that, then you open the door for a lot of other things, right? And this is exactly as Mr. Youngblood here just wrote. Biden thought it was cool for him to do this. He's been doing it.
Yes.
Right. So he figured, hey, the black folks like me, they've been like it. So hey, let me just go ahead and make this comment. They'll understand where I'm coming from, and that blew up in his face.
Yeah, I mean, and it is this idea that where do we draw the line though? So Biden was invited to the picnic, the cookout rather. Sorry, we don't say picnic.
Cookout. We don't do picnic. No, we don't go to no picnic.
Invited into the cookout, and he was Uncle Joe and all of these things, and he was vice president to the nation's first black president. People seem to love him then, and you can argue that the bar should be higher now that he's seeking the presidency. But he was in the presidency before, right, when Obama beat him and some other people in the primary. So I just am fascinated. I just find it fascinating when people pick and choose when somebody is, yes, Tanisha A.G. Bell. That's my cousin, y'all. Action, yes. Yes. It is interesting when we pick and choose who gets invited to the cookout, who doesn't, when we pay attention to their record, when we don't. And also, it's interesting, too, that some people are using this as an opportunity to say that they are no longer going to vote for Biden. And this is just yet another example of why you shouldn't vote for Biden. What do you say to those folks? Yeah,
here's what I think, right? The people who are saying they're not going to vote for Biden because of this issue, they weren't going to vote for him in the first place. I firmly believe that they had no intention of voting for him anyway, right? And I think what this does, right, is it's going to add, it gives them more ammunition, it gives them fuel to say, see, we told you he's not the ideal candidate. We told you all of this stuff was bad. And, look, I'll be the first one to tell you, I wasn't initially a Biden supporter. He was not my candidate.
Me either.
I didn't vote for him. But, it's kind of this case, you got to dance with them that brung you, right? I mean, we're here at the dance now. So that's the dance partner I'm going to pick out of the choices that we have, right? And, like you said, you know, if you think about like who was on the dais at the time, right, and at 400 listed, that 400 nominees, right, that we had, or potential candidates we had for, you know, for that, you know, when we had the chance to pick what we said, what we wanted, right? And we talked about this, right? Listening to that. There were the younger candidates, there were the fresher candidates, whatever, and we went straight.
Yes, and candidates of color, quite honestly, right?
And candidates of color, right? But
and social media.
Yeah, and social media. And what we did is we picked those black candidates apart. We picked them apart to death, right? And to the point where this is where we are. You know, so, you know, and you know, this whole ocean, you know, one of the things that I'm really, well, since this all has happened, one of the things that I'm really kind of unnerved by is when I see celebrities, particularly young, and I'll just call them out, right? You know, I was looking at, you know, Faison Love, Lakeith Stanfield, whatever. I was reading some of their Instagram posts talking about this. And these are people who, you know, for whatever their financial situation is, it's better than most of the people who are following them on these social media platforms, right? Yeah. And so if Lakeith Stanfield chooses not to vote, right, there are going to be the things in general that affect him. But from an economic standpoint, medical care, all these kinds of things, those things don't touch him in the same way. And for him to kind of make these blanket statements with no context, really, no real context, to say, hey, you guys go out, you need to vote anyway, or you need to make a decision anyway about what you want to do. What it did was, when I looked at the comments on his page, is a bunch of people who just had largely decided they weren't going to vote. And I just found that to be incredibly irresponsible.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a good question, and the question is about context. And you know, this was Sharice Black just said about, you know, they did the same thing to Clinton, and I think you can keep, you know, listing people, right, in terms of people being picked apart. Like Clinton was great, and he was so cool and so awesome, and he was the first black president, and all that nonsense. And then, you know, after people learn more about his record, right, actually pay attention to the things that matter. That shifted a bit, but you had already been, you know, invited him to the cookout, for lack of a better term, and then you wanted to decide that that was he was no longer, or Hillary Clinton, because of her distance to Bill Clinton, was no longer a viable candidate. You know, she did not sign the crime bill, but for some reason she was not. You know, she would not make a good president and to a lot of people, because she said super predator. And also, like, this idea. So back to this idea of context. Let's get into that.
Okay.
Because even when we think about this interview with Charlamagne Tha God, I mean, Biden did say it jokingly, right? So it was a context. He has since apologized for those who have just are over it. I'm over it. I don't care to talk about it too much more. Except with you, Mark, of course. But you have that in terms of the context. You have this 1994 crime bill, right, where people are picking and choosing who to hold hostage over the crime bill, you know. But then you have a Congress full of people who voted for the crime bill, including some members of our Congressional Black Caucus. But these contextualizes it, because at the time, crack was raging through our communities. Right. And, you know, I love Kurt Schmoke. Let me just go ahead and say it. But he had a wonderful, compelling testimony in Congress during that time when they were debating it, right? And they were talking about it. And, you know, there are people who had to do something when their communities, and he was mayor of Baltimore, but they had to do something because their communities were literally being gutted by the, you know, the crime, the violence, the deaths, the rapes, all of those things that were happening in that time. And so for people to really talk about it out of the context in which it was written, even though it is highly problematic, and what has happened since then is abhorrent and unacceptable, for sure, right? From criminalizing people who are sick, to mass incarceration, all the issues around mass incarceration, we're on board with that, right?
Especially when we compare it to how the opiate
especially
crisis is being treated.
But if you think about it in a more compelling way, and within context, the context in which it was written, you have to think about it in a more complex way. And I think social media, although it has wonderful benefits, sometimes it just totally just reduces things, very reductionist in certain way, because of how it works. And people don't take the time to go back and say, well, why did so many people sign this crime bill? Who signed the crime bill? Why would they do this? Why wouldn't they? you're like mad at Biden, but you know, caping for Bernie, who also signed it. You know, like it's this picking and choosing about who we're going to hold hostage, or hi Karen Dixon, who we're going to hold hostage over, you know, these decisions that are made in these political spaces that are often oh yeah, and David Youngblood, you write whole sentences, so that's why I'm like,
I was scanning them real quick.
okay, let me go down there. But he said the crime bill was insisted on Black people. Black people said you have to do something. Crack is decimating my community. All right. Amy Darnell wants to know, does the frustration go away or become lessened if Biden picks Harris or Demings as his vice president? We're going to get into that in a second, Amy. So can you talk about this issue of context? Amy, that's our next point, Amy. We're going to it.
Amy's my buddy. She's a professor in Missouri.
Hey, Amy. Hey, Dr. Amy. Give her props.
And my sister was on here too, Karen. So.
Oh, yeah. All right, so can you talk more about context and why there's so little of it in social media?
And again, we're probably going to say a lot of things here that's not going to be popular amongst us, right?
Yeah, don't cancel me. I'm an individual. I make bad decisions. I make false statements. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I do the wrong thing. Sometimes I use the wrong word. I've been perfect in my entire life. I've probably done some bad things to people, but most of the time I've treated people well. But please try not to cancel me because I make a mistake. Thank you. Go back. Go ahead.
Well, I did know that. You know, yeah, but no, you know what I think it is too, right? Is that, you know, there's a lot of people, you know, that just don't know, right? And I think that a lot of people's and I mean, this is about in general, period, about everybody. I think a lot of people's interest, understanding of politics, it has only come about in the last few years, right? With the kind of this burgeoning, with the burgeoning, I should say, rather, of social media. I think that because social media puts you in a position where you don't have to work that hard to find out the information, I think people are reading those things from a surface standpoint. In my media literacy class, this is one of the things that I teach my students, right? But you also need to be very mindful of where you're getting that information. People are reading, John Smith's blog and saying, see, I told you, but that's just John Smith's opinion, right? Mm-hmm. People aren't differentiating between those things, right? Or people are disseminating information on social media, retweeting things on social media, right, that are very much so kind of surface thinking, right, but without getting to the heart, right, of, like you just mentioned, of all of these other concerns and all these other issues and who voted on what. The 80s was a very, very different time. Everybody was using words like thugs and predators, and I heard that from everybody, right, during the time. And like you said, Rosa Parks, for example, right? Those that broke into her house during that time and assaulted and attacked her, and right, old women, getting hit over the head, like you mentioned, Mr. Youngblood. I mean, right, all of that stuff was happening, right? And so something had to be done. It was ravaging these communities, absolutely, right? And so, it was just a very, very different time. And it very much so is the case of what, Maya Angelou says, people do what they know how to do at the time. And when they know better, they do better. And right. Now, and I posted something on Facebook the other day and on Instagram, this Malcolm X quote, right, about condemning people, right, for for the way they think and for what they know, because the people who are doing all of this condemnation, right, some of these people just got in the know themselves. These people haven't always been woke. Another word I hate. Now.
Me too.
But these people haven't always been a thing. So I think all of us are on a learning curve.
Yes.
When it comes to this. But to me, the bottom line, it becomes that you got Trump and you got Biden. Mm-hmm. And some people say the lesser of two evils. I always say the evil of two lessers, mm-hmm. right? In this case, right? And I'm going to go with Biden's evil because I think his is a lot. I mean, there's no way the people, like you said, the people who are saying in trying to defend I don't know what they're defending actually, but in picking apart Biden's record,
right,
across some of the things, picking apart some of the things that he said, and choosing or in electing to do that, right? You know, what exactly then is the alternative? What do you stick? Are you saying you're gonna vote for Trump? Because really what you're saying to me is you're not gonna vote at all, which is a vote for Trump.
right, right. So yeah, and one of our viewers just asked, like, how do you slow down the spread of misinformation? And that leads to that, you know, this idea of I'm not voting for Biden, but that doesn't mean I'm not voting for Trump. We are in a two-party system,
Yes.
a two-party political system. You know, whether you think we need more parties like some folks, whether you think we need, you know, what we have is working. You know, we right now in this moment we have a two-party system. And so how it works, you know, it's just simple mathematics. You know, if you vote, then you participate. If you don't vote, then your non-vote goes to the winner. That's just how that works. And so this idea that you can just kind of pick and choose and say, oh, this candidate is not perfect, or this candidate has some major flaws, or what have you, and I just can't side with this candidate, doesn't mean that. Yeah, I mean, you have the right to vote or not vote. Absolutely.
Right.
It doesn't mean that if you don't vote, that there will be no consequences. And so it's that kind of thing. It's this kind of inability to understand what how the process works. So how do we? And Wesley asked us about cutting down on misinformation, right? So how do we not only slow down the misinformation, but how do we speed up the context or the other parts that need to be known? Like, how do we speed up the information?
Yeah. You know, the only thing, I mean, this is again something I told my students in my media literacy course, right? Is we just need to be aware, right, of the information that we're, you know, ingesting. We need to pick it apart. We need to do the research. We need to go beyond, you know, just, you know, clickbait. Right, looking at things and oftentimes, right, like I think what happens with some of this stuff with clickbait too is that I think that oftentimes people just want to be on the right side of the issue and they really don't know what you know they're saying. They don't know the whole story as to what they're saying, right? And so when you come back to people with these facts, like, well, you know, take Bernie for example. And I don't mean to pick on Bernie because I know there's a lot of people who are Bernie supporters, but Bernie did sign that bill, right? When you say that to people, they go, well, that's beside the point. But what's the difference, though? What is the difference?
Well, one of our readers or viewers just said, poison sweet, poison raw, still poison. Last name L, Danny L, thank you. So I'm not sure if that's the context in which Danny meant it, but that's how I understand it.
Yeah.
It is poison. It is still poison, right? So, but even if it is poison and you're like, I'm not going to deal in any poison, just know that even you making that decision has consequences.
Yeah.
Someone, Nelson King Sr. says, that's 100. Biden may not be the top choice, but the alternative of 4 more years of Trump destroying the country is not a good thing. And that's the other thing I want to ask about. In social media, sometimes I see so much flippant comments about the pandemic and folks dying and unnecessarily. We know that this could have been not necessarily prevented, but at least the numbers could have been curbed. Had we done some things and had some information, some pertinent information earlier, and had our leadership made some very different decisions, had decided to do something, anything really. But the fact that the vast majority of people who are dying are frontline workers, and the vast majority of those workers are people of color, Black people in particular, Latino, Latinx in particular. I can't wrap my mind around why it's even people who say, oh, Biden and Trump is the same thing. Yeah. Like, I don't even know what the rationale is behind that statement. I mean, patriarchy is patriarchy. White supremacy is white supremacy. Those who have benefited and have had privilege based on those things being in place, like most white men over the age 70. Let's keep that
right.
Yeah. I get it from that perspective, right? Yeah. But I don't get it in terms of looking at the records of both, even with Biden's mistakes or missteps, like the crime bill, which at the time people wanted, people in Congress wanted, a lot of people in society wanted. but even if you say that's a mistake, even with Anita Hill, Dr. Hill, who's amazing, but Anita Hill, it's like even if you're looking at all of that as which goes behind that, how is it that Trump is the same?
I don't know how people are making that rationale. I think it's just something that people are saying, right, to kind of justify the fact that they just don't like Biden. And if you don't like Biden, that's fine. Great. But I really do. I think it's a justification for it. And there's no way in the world, right, that you can believe, right, that Biden is as bad as Trump, when Trump is telling you to, inject yourself, with Clorox and telling you to take, not ignoring the advice of medical, and I saw the man's comment here about Biden as a coward, just like Trump is. But okay, those are the two people we have.
And Biden served in the military. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm from a military family.
I was in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, so I was like, excuse me? I mean, I'm not saying just because you serve in the military that you're courageous. Yeah. A lot of people go to the military and they're scared. They're fighting and they're scared. And they come back and they Dr. Mark was scared, but he went.
I went. I finished.
I was like, I'm not accepting that. So I come back with another comment. But we want to deal in facts and we want to deal in truth. And whether
this thing here is true.
Okay.
That he's the alternative. He's not the almighty.
Yes, Keisha. Joe Biden is always on point. Name Keisha, she's gonna be on point. Joe Biden is the alternative, not the almighty. This is fitting. Stop looking for a savior. And it's this whole savior complex. This cancellation. I wrote a piece for NMPA on cancel culture and Kamala Harris. People. I mean, it was stark. Now, when she's given the business to the Supreme Court justice who shall not be named, I like Game of Thrones, who shall not be named. Yeah. She was amazing. People were like, "Oh my God, she's a superstar. She's wonderful. Oh my God, she's amazing. We need somebody just like her in this way, shape, and form." Then she wants to work with the president, and she ain't nothing. She's just some former prosecutor who slept her way to the top, who put a bunch of black men in prison. And I'm looking. I was like, "How are you looking at her record? She ain't really black." I'm like, she went to Howard. She pledged AKA at Howard, the nation's first sorority for African American women. What are you talking? Like, what are you talking about? She's not black. Like, she doesn't even identify as black because her husband is white. Like, it was just all of this. Like, it was so stark. It was like in a matter of days. And she went from being like, the person when she tore Biden up in the debate. People were like, "Oh my gosh, she's amazing. She's amazing. She's amazing." And then a week later, she wasn't anything. She might as well have been, something on the bottom of your shoe. That's how people were talking about her. And how do we manage that? I guess that goes back to the question of this misinformation, or just even if you don't like a candidate, just like looking at a person's platform. Because I'm telling you, Mark, I even asked you, everybody who's like, "Oh, Biden, he ain't gonna do nothing for black people." I'm like, "Well, have you read the plan?" Not one of them has read the plan.
No.
I said it's only 21 pages. It's 21 pages. Have you read the plan?
On the website?
Yeah.
It don't even seem like it's 21 pages.
Yes. But I was like, have you read it?
Yeah.
Read it. But no, they haven't. It's like, did you, Kamala Harris, when they were going in on her, have you looked at her background? No. Have you looked at her platform? No. Okay, so, if we're talking about social media, why do people feel so comfortable just standing on fiction? Like, you can not like a candidate. You can be like, out of all the people who were in the primary, because out of all the people in the primary, I only had 3 people that I was really interested in.
Yeah.
So I can see how you can look at people and say, okay, you have to do that. You have to make those decisions. But when you come down to 2 candidates, then it becomes problematic when you spend your time and your cultural capital, because that's what social media is. It's cultural capital.
Absolutely.
Defaming people, or, just talking about things without providing any real context and not having any knowledge yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I just know. I just decided.
Yeah. I mean, it's social media is, like you say, on one place, in one instance, right? This is very beneficial and kind of very certainly kind of powerful platform, but at the same time, it's a very dangerous platform as well, too. And there are a lot of people that are just kind of spouting off information, right? and it's not even true, right? And Abdullah, I hear what you're saying, man. Like Biden is not the choice of African Americans, and we put up with 2 terms of Bush and 2 terms of Reagan, whatever. But what Trump is doing is very, very different, right? Is that Trump is not a politician. Trump is an entertainer, right? And the thing, here's the interesting thing about Trump too, and I'm just a little bit off of what you were saying, Bert, but I've seen his comments pop up, Nasenia, and you know, when Trump was not even thinking about politics, right? At the time when he was writing long, putting big, op-eds in the paper about the Central Park Five, right? That all of a sudden, right now, everybody's on that bandwagon. I think for who said it, it's all bandwagoning, right? That case has been around forever. Prior to Ava DuVernay's miniseries, Ken Burns and his daughter Sarah had done a documentary about it. Not earlier in like early 2000s, and nobody was even talking about that then, right? And so now the thing is that a lot of this stuff is in people's faces, right? Social media, people aren't thinking before they write anything. They just blast it off, right? And then they don't go back to check if what they said is true or whether it's real or whether it comes from a credible source. Nothing. Like you say, they're not reading the information. The people are not as informed as they think they are. Right. Social media makes you sound like you're informed, but you're not.
Right. And one of our readers, Sharice Black, says hiding behind a phone or computer is inconvenient. She said they're comfortable because it is social media. One was like, well, Biden signed up legislation and Trump didn't. Trump was not a politician. He didn't have an opportunity to sign any legislation racist. Right. But have you looked at what he's been signing since he's in office now? And this person is not a Trump supporter, but I'm saying that's what I'm talking about. Misinformation. You have to be in Congress in order to sign any of those bills that you're mad at Joe Biden about. Trump was not in Congress at the time. He did not have any previous experience as a politician, which is half of the reason he won. People liked him because he was an entertainer. He was outside of the establishment. He does not adhere to civil, what we call these, dominant notions of how we act and behave in these types of institutions. And so that's part of his appeal. It's like he is not a traditional Republican.
No.
He's a fiscally conservative Republican. If you look at his fiscal policies since he's been in office, he's not he's pretending to be a conservative, but he's totally flipped on a lot of issues.
And people wanted something new.
Yes.
And he represented that newness, right? And on top of that, right, what Trump did that was smart was that Trump, when you think about him in terms of Hillary Clinton, I think took for granted certain things were going to kind of fall that way, right, for her. And he went in and sold those people that bill of goods and they bought it.
Yeah.
Right. And so, here's the thing. None of these candidates can be all things to all people. Right. Everybody's issues is not going to get addressed. I mean, politics has been like that from jump. Right. And, I think what's interesting also about it too, even when and I love what you said about Trump, right, being an entertainer, right, because I think about, right, the number of Black artists, right, who pumped Trump up, right, as a model, right, or as a goal, so to speak, in rap music, on television shows. I mean, you go back and you look at that, right, and now he's and that's the thing about him, right, he's been able to kind of teeter the line between being popular and then, now he's in politics, and then everybody, right, on social media again, bringing up all these pictures. Look, Oprah took a picture with Trump. Everybody took a picture with Trump because Trump was not a politician. He was in the entertainment world. That's why everybody has pictures with him.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, those things have to be put in context, but Trump is petty, right? Trump built what they built, that tennis pavilion just to unearth the basketball court that Barack Obama had put down. Right? I mean, that's how petty they are, right?
Right.
Yeah, Bush and Reagan, they may have been so a lot of people, they may have been the Antichrist. Yeah, but Reagan was governor, Abdullah.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Yeah, let me go ahead and say this, because Abdullah's making a lot of broad generalizations. And let me just say this, Abdullah. First of all, not all young African Americans are anti-Biden. That's not true. I'm actually a professor. I work with young African Americans, and I know that many of them are not. Young African Americans aren't necessarily seeing things through strategic lens in the ways that those of us who have been on Earth a little bit longer do, and we look at the long game and not the short game.
Mm-hmm.
Not to dismiss how they feel, but I'm just saying that also with this, young people are voting for Bernie or what have you. Bernie Sanders, and this is my piece on Bernie Sanders. And I'm not a hater. I'm not a lover. I'm just what it is. Bernie Sanders had an opportunity after this last election to take that momentum and to build a legitimate third party that could counter the Democrats and the Republicans. He did not do that because he wanted to be president. Because if he had done that, he would never have been president because he would have to build something for someone else to ascend. All right. So I think that was a huge missed opportunity, for Bernie Sanders. But to come on here and to just keep pushing out false information that's not backed by anything but your opinion. The statements that we are making are actually based in fact. That's what we get paid to do. And then, so I can't come on here, and Dr. Cunningham can't come on here spouting lies to you because we can't. We actually have PhDs in our area. All right, so that's the other thing. This whole anti-intellectual thrust that just is permeating social media. I'm not mad at you because you don't have a PhD, so don't be mad at me because I have one. But you also don't get to come on here. You can because it's America. We love America because everybody can say what they want to say and try to diminish or dismiss what I'm saying when you have no information and you don't have fact-based information that has been tested and comes from an objective place. All right. So when you're talking about real change, when you're talking about, you can't make broad generalizations in that way. And since we're talking about broad generalizations, when we're thinking about Biden, 8 out of 10, every poll has shown that 8 out of 10 Black folks are going to vote for Biden. So my next question to you, Dr. Cunningham, is why is there so much focus on the people who are not voting for Biden, or the Black people who are not voting for Biden, or the Black people who are voting for Trump? 8% of African Americans voted for Trump in the last election. 8 out of 10 Black registered voters. These people actually vote, not people who talk stuff on social media and then don't vote. These people who actually vote, who are actually registered voters, have said that they're going to vote for Biden. So why is there so much focus on the 2 out of 10 who aren't voting for Biden, or the 8% of Blacks who are supporting Trump in social media and the popular culture?
I think the reason we don't focus on the Black people who are voting for Trump, right, is the very reason we're mad about Biden's comment. We don't consider them as Black, or they certainly, and I don't, well, let me rephrase that. I don't think that we don't consider them as Black, but I don't think we consider them as certainly attuned with what's going on with Black people, right? Or what's going, and so we just kind of ignore them, and we don't think there are that many of them anyway. Right? I mean, because how could there be, right? How could there be that many of them, right? And so, the fact that we're putting, like you said, this emphasis on, I mean, think about, right? It's just just really fascinating to me, right? The same day that Biden is apologizing for this comment that he makes, Trump is basically holding it up for a Nazi sympathizer in Henry Ford. Good bloodlines, right? This kind of thing. And nobody has said a word about this, but as the Black community, right? Or as, again, I don't want to do that, but as Black people, or certainly as Black Twitter or on Black social media, all of this ire, so to speak, has been focused on or aimed at Biden making this comment, right? And that's the very reason why we're not focusing on that 8% of Black people. You sent that video to me. And I think we also have an idea of what we think, right, these Black Trump supporters look like, that they look like Diamond and Silk, that they look like Clark, Sheriff Clark, right? That they're these, but that video that you sent me of these Trump supporters who are Black, or everybody from, like you said, the sister with the natural hair to, they run the gamut, right? And so that's a concern.
And it's more interesting to talk about.
It is more interesting to talk about. Why are they so interested in him? What is it that he's offering that, what are they looking at, right? Because he doesn't strike me as this, conservative in the traditional sense, like you mentioned, right? He, if he's a Christian, then Gandhi was a Christian. I don't know, I mean, so he's not talking that, but what's the fascination? Is it economics?
Yeah, someone did write that he's trying to keep more money in the country, but yeah, he's also trying to give more of that money to the 1%.
Yes, he is.
Right. So you're not wrong, but you're not in terms of how wealth distribution works.
Mm-hmm.
And what he's trying to do with it is really to keep the super wealthy. It's not even the wealthy, but the super wealthy enriched and empowered. But back to you.
Because let me ask you this question too, Naseenia. I mean, if you had millions of dollars, right? You're worrying about your money. Isn't Trump the viable candidate for you?
Oh, I joke with my students all the time, like, hey, if I go up one more tax bracket, it's gonna be a struggle.
Oh Lord. Yeah, I mean, really, I mean, and so from that practicality standpoint, right? People with a lot of money, and when we say all this time about the, about the distribution of wealth, and a lot of people, there shouldn't be billionaires, there shouldn't be. There are a lot of billionaires in this world who didn't inherit that money; they earned it, or whatever else. But I mean, but when you start thinking about those things in that context, and
you have to think about the ways in which white supremacy works.
Yes,
it is invisible, and it requires consent.
Mm-hmm.
And it requires consent from those who are perpetrators of it and those who have to live under it to some way, shape, or form. And so when you talk about Black folks who support Trump, it's not unusual that you would have a percentage of people who are like, I mean, I don't care if he's, white supremacist adjacent or however, whatever terms you want. I don't care if, he's working to roll back civil rights or he has a Secretary of Education who is literally, just decimated all of the educational gains in education that have happened over the years, including those, that were put in place by some Republican presidents. People aren't really talking about it in those ways. And so when we think about consent is required in order for this dominant system or the system of domination to continue. Only questions are how to identify the candidate we want and why we failed the primary to identify that candidate. Yes, I think Greta Mayberry. That's a great question. Jetta's been making great comments the whole time. In my mind, they're informed.
Jedi is an author. That's right. He's got a science fiction book coming out.
Oh yeah, and I was like,
that's not a shameless plug. He did not tell me to do that. I'm just saying. It's I'm putting
the emphasis on the wrong syllable. Sorry, Jedi. Because I'm saying it like Jedi, but it is science fiction. But anyway, my point is that how do we go from having such a robust and interesting group of people to what we have, which I think we need to talk about that too. And then, also, why are people so committed to, as my mother would say, cutting off your nose to spite your own face? Somebody, last name Nelson, said that some people who voted for Trump before, Black folks who voted for Trump before, weren't really sure what they were getting. They wanted something different, right? He says now we've had the opportunity to see him at play, and a lot of what he's done has been negative, right? Or I think he said has not been positive. All right. And so to me, it's Nelson King Sr. Yes, I think a lot of the votes for Trump last time was because we didn't know what we were getting. I think people will have a more informed decision this time because we've seen him in action, and a lot of it has not been positive. Thank you, Nelson King Sr. So, and then this whole idea that Black people, even if you ain't Black, if you vote Republican, when there's such a long history of Blacks voting Republican, is highly problematic. But I think it plays into this whole like decontextualize. Let me get this catchphrase, let me get a slogan, let me get a hashtag, as opposed to really looking at the complexities of those issues. And that Black people who are Republicans and have been lifelong Republicans are not necessarily sellouts. They're not necessarily whitewashed. They might have different views on economics. They might have different views on immigration. They might have conservative values. They might be a one. Someone put it to me. He's a Black Republican, and he said he's he doesn't vote for the platform. He votes on one. Oh, he's a one issue voter. So there's only one issue he cares about, and that's the issue he pays attention to. And whatever candidate has that issue and is supporting it in the way that he wants it, that's what he votes for. All right. So there are lots of different ways. So I think it is wrong to assume that people who are Black and vote Republican would not vote for Trump, or something's wrong with them if they are Republican. Tanisha says, it's not that you aren't Black, it's that you have made it clear that the plight of Black and brown people is not a priority to you, that you're more concerned with your position than our collective communal growth as a people. So, Mark, I don't know if you have a response to that. And we are taking questions, so please send your questions.
I think, it. On one hand, I really truly believe that there is not anything any candidate can do that's going to be enough for us as Black people. I don't, because we have been so disenfranchised and we have been so left out, and we have so long not had a seat at the table, right? That all of us have these things that we would like to see addressed, and all of those things either can't be addressed or they won't all be, not all can't be addressed or they won't all be addressed. And for somebody, that's going to be a sticking point. That's going to be an issue for all of us, right? And this is what happens, right, when there's a lack of representation, when there's a lack of concern over the years for these issues and stuff, and then you don't know who to believe. For example, Bernie Sanders, I saw some of his ads, right? And Bernie Sanders has this kind of all-inclusiveness, kind of platform, but it's for everybody. But then I heard him, and he hooked up with Killer Mike, and I was showing this commercial that he did with Killer Mike, and Killer Mike is reading this James Baldwin quote, and then in the background, and while it's the voiceover reading this quote, there's all of these different races of people, and that is just out of context, because James Baldwin was specifically Black.
Yes.
Not mean, he specifically. And so all of these things are being taken out of context because all of them are pandering to us in some kind of way. They're pandering to Black people in some way. This, and again, and I think it is this whole notion of this kind of monolithic Black community where they think that if they address these things, that's going to get it for all of us. And that's not going to get it for all of us, right?
And I think Malcolm X, because you mentioned him before, or someone mentioned him, right now we have a choice. The choice not to vote. This is Deshaun Robbie. Should not be an option. Politics has always been about the lesser of two evils, and the decision is now who's going to do the least amount of damage to our community and the country in general. Thank you, Deshaun. Also, I think that people, Malcolm X had said, encourage people to vote, because he was like, Black people need to do everything that they can in order to change their conditions. And I also say that I think a lot of times we focus too much on the presidential elections and not enough on our local and state elections.
That's what Shonda Dixon had said that. I saw that.
We spend so much time.
That's your Sarah, by the way.
I'm sorry?
That's your Sarah, by the way.
Oh, hey, Sarah. Another reason to love her. When we think about politics, I think we focus so much attention on the presidential. Hey, Sarah. We focus so much attention on the presidential election that we don't pay attention to our local and our state elections, and who's elected to sheriff and things of those natures. We talk about criminal justice, but we're not even paying attention to who the sheriffs are in our counties and communities and what have you. So I think that social media can be a way to change that, to help people really start thinking in a more complex way. I wish it would happen, but I'm not sure. Let's go back to this question again about how is it that we got to Biden and Trump? We
had Andrew Yang, we had Buttigieg, we had Amy. I said Buttigieg, right? Actually, I haven't been. It took me forever. Publisher. Who do we have? Elizabeth Warren. That's who I voted on.
Cory Booker.
We had Cory Booker. We had Kamala Harris. We had Mike Bloomberg.
We had a whole bunch of folks.
We had a bunch of them.
Right. And so this is so it's like, how do you do that and you get to and let me be clear, Biden was not my candidate. This is what's cracking me up. I was like, how am I a sellout? Like you're not voting, but I'm the sellout because I'm voting. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not Black, but the people voting for Trump are Black. Right? Like, what world is this? We're in the upside down, right? What is happening? But yeah, we have all of these different candidates, and still we end up with the same types of options in terms of
what we said we didn't want.
Right, which we said we didn't want, right? I'm sick of career politicians. I'm sick of people who are outside of the system and don't bring any experience with them. Everything that people say that they don't want. I want to see a Black woman. Now people are saying they're not going to vote for Biden unless we have a Black vice presidential candidate, Black woman vice presidential candidate. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, to go back to what Amy's question about when she had asked the question about with that kind of diffuse some of this. I'm gonna be honest with you. If Biden picks Kamala Harris,
no, I was
like, that's gonna make it worse.
Thank you. I was like, cause see, I'm trying to be objective.
If you pick Kamala Harris, it's gonna be worse because Black people are already saying, "Well, look at what she did in California when she was a prosecutor. Look how many brothers she put in jail." That they're gonna have a problem with that. And the question I always ask,
Black woman. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it real. Black people gonna have a problem with any Black woman.
Oh yeah, Stacey Abrams.
No, I love Stacey.
Yeah, but they're gonna be like.
My thing is, why people think all of the misogyny and sexism is going to somehow miraculously that is targeted at Black women candidates, Black women in general, but Black women candidates is going to magically fall to the side and people are going to be rushing to the polls. And quite honestly, I don't want to see another Black person in the White House cleaning up after Trump.
Yeah,
I don't want
all his fault.
Yes, let it be all his fault, and let these folks. He was let his folks clean that up. And the Supreme Court or the Attorney General or a number of positions that will have long-lasting value. Not that being vice president won't, but just saying, like this whole push that I won't. I was like, why do y'all think that people are going to somehow miraculously get behind Black women? In this particular space, which they did not. They actually destroyed every single Black woman that tried to get into this particular space and have done so over the years.
Yeah.
Some of our own worst enemies.
And my thing is too, if look, Hillary Clinton, no matter how you feel about her, Hillary Clinton is presidential. She is knowledgeable. She is
qualified.
She was the most qualified candidate on. I mean, she was right. But let's be for real. Hillary Clinton is not president because she's a woman. That's bottom line. That's why Elizabeth Warren did not even win in her home state during the primary, right? We know why that is. So if white women are having hell trying to be president, or what make, and the sisters, like you say, the Black women got it twofold because the white folks was picking them apart, certainly, right? And then the Black folks is like, we do these kinds, so it's hard. And so the bigger question becomes, in terms of the Black community, who exactly is it that you do want to see?
Yes, that is the question.
Who is it that you want?
Who's good enough?
Who's good enough?
And what are the expectations? And what do you think they can get done within the two-party system that exists?
Exactly.
And with the composition of Congress and the ways that it is, whether it's the House of Representatives or the Senate. Let's go back to basic civics.
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of that missing on Twitter and Instagram or what have you.
They was talking in class during that time.
Nelson King says, I'm not going to vote anyone. I'm not going to not anyone's responses, but not voting trouble because a Black person doesn't get voted for. It would not be helpful to our cause at all because we would be voting basically from the same thing on the other side of that. I don't want to just have a Black face. I want to have a Black person that's fully qualified. See, that's the thing, fully qualified and cerebral to make decisions.
Yeah.
That's the bar that people have for Black women.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can have an entertainer over here golfing while 100,000 people are dead. Right? And you have someone who was as qualified as Hillary Clinton was to be president. You can have someone who has been in the Senate, who has been in the House of Representatives, who has served in state politics, in the state legislatures or what have you, has been a career politician, has worked in government or what have you, and they'll be like, no, especially if she's a Black woman, and a lot of that comes from within our community, so it's always like, oh, we need to win. Let's now we're gonna prop this Black woman up because now we have this opportunity. I said, oh no, you don't get to oh, I'm sorry, I'm having a conversation with myself. But I was like, oh no, but I was like, yeah, no, you don't get to now tell us, because we weren't good enough to be president. Now you don't get to tell us that we got to be vice president in order to save this country. You do it. Find that wonderful white woman, that wonderful white male candidate that was so awesome that you didn't take the time to pick apart or think about or critique or read about. Let them do it, but leave us out of it, except on the Supreme Court and the Attorney General's office and in other important cabinet positions, which they're all important, but where we can actually affect change for the the better of the country, and hopefully Black folks will get some of that change as well.
I mean, it's like you said too about this notion of white supremacy, right? That just kind of seeps in, it's everywhere, right? And that kind of mentality, right, is why we don't give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, right? You know, and you know, Barack Obama, right? Everybody was singing his praises, and then at the end, I've heard more Black people talking about how Barack Obama he ain't do this, and he ain't, you know. And the thing is like you say, within that two-party structure, within that, you know, the way politics has been structured, or the way that it is structured, what is it that actually can be done, right? And that's something we need to start thinking about and asking questions about too, right? And I think, like you said, that if we're voting in all of these elections and having a say and who is in every facet of it, right, we might start to see some things shift. Not completely, right? Maybe not 100%, because nothing doesn't happen overnight, right?
Right.
But I think we might be able to see something. Now, let me tell you honestly, like, even though I didn't vote for him, and then I question myself now why I didn't. Elizabeth Warren at the time, like I said, there were things that she did and said that appealed to me. Again, I was able to put her Native American debacle to the side and really kind of look at what she would do for the country politically, right? But then I asked myself, like, you know, but why didn't you vote for Andrew Yang?
Well, I know why I didn't.
You know, like I was like, why didn't I do that? You know, and so, you know, that's my thing, you know, but that's the question I think we really just kind of go back to, right? Is, you know, what is, you know, for us as Black people, you know, how do we, you know, look at that when it comes to political views? What is Blackness when it comes to political views?
Right. And Danny says we're not picking them apart for no reason. Kamala is a pro mass incarceration. So here's my thing with that.
Yeah.
The way, and this I think gets back to the theme of this whole discussion, right? And that is how Blackness works in social media. One of the things that we talked about, and how it becomes politicized. And so, yeah, Danny, it's cool that you should actually critique people. You should pick apart their platforms. You should look at the candidates in a very complex way. The ways in which we do it has different consequences when we do it to our Black candidates. Yeah. It is true. And so you might be saying something that is critically engaged and thoughtful and intelligent or whatever, that will sure enough be taken and used in some way against a Black person or a Black candidate, right? One of the things that we have to think about is the language in which we use to discuss things and to discuss issues and to discuss Black candidates, because a lot of it actually mirrors the same language that white supremacists used when talking about Black people. All right. And so that is why they so easily lift our comments and lift what people are saying in social media and put it on a t-shirt or put it, totally decontextualize it again and put it on a t-shirt. But, this whole politicizing of Blackness in the 2020 in an effort to gain votes is highly problematic. This whole idea that if you vote for Biden, you ain't Black. If you vote for Trump, you are Black. And like, really, how are we defining Blackness at this moment on this critical point in history? And if we can't figure that out, then we have more problems in the presidential election.
Right. Because I do think that Blackness is being treated like this monolithic thing, as I've said before, right? That is one size fit all kind of thing, right? And it's not, right? There's varying opinions and varying ideas about what should go down. Like, for example, like one of the things somebody just mentioned in one of the posts, right, about reparations.
Yeah, I mean,
what does that look like? What does that look like? I know what it looked like to some Black folks, but what does it look like to the rest, to the rest of us, or some of the rest of us, right? Is it even viable? Is that something we should even be fighting for at this point, right?
Those groups who have gotten reparations or some form of it typically have been aligned, and they were okay with Dr. Mark Cunningham getting money or getting whatever, and Dr. Nasinga Burton not getting anything based on some pre-existing criteria or some voted upon criteria, right? They were okay with how it was doled out to the community, how it was directed to certain organizations and things of that nature, or what have you. I'm like, can we even do that as Black people? Are we going to be okay with if let's say we're magically granted reparations, which I think is just going to be hard because they got to give us the whole country. If anything less than the whole country, I don't know. But that's just me. But
right now I'm just thinking, like, if they just get these student loans, I'll
take the student loans.
I'm prepared.
Yes. But when we think about that, and that's what we're talking about. We're having these conversations in academic spaces. We're having conversations in our civic organizations, our political organizations like the Urban League and NAACP and what have you. We're having these conversations in so many places, but they're not happening in the ways in which they need to happen on social media. And so this idea of blackness and questioning one's blackness, especially in public spaces, I would never say that someone's not black. I think I fight with people all the time about Clarence Thomas. I'm like, he's a black man from
That's a black man. Yeah.
In Georgia. A black man. Like, he's black. He might not vote the way you want him to. He's highly problematic. He's not someone I ever want to be in a room with.
Right.
He is definitely a black man.
Like, I don't want to eat dinner with him, but
right. Stop it.
But you're right. I mean, but what like one of the she's actually a former student of mine. It said they quoted the Audre Lorde quote, right? Which it was one of my favorites. I love that. That's the thing we also have to remember too, that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house.
Never.
So the thing is, right, is that we're working in a context, right, where the rules have already been set up. And so we expect to go into this space, right, and shut that thing down using the same tools, right, using the same processes, using the same strategies, and it's not going to happen that way. It's not
I want Black people to also remember we're 12% of the population.
Yes.
We're not a Caribbean nation. We're not an African nation. We are 12% of the population. And so I'm not saying that we should give up. I think we should keep pressing. People don't give us credit for it, but we are the Black people who fought against our oppressors when we were in the minority, and we won civil rights for ourselves and for the rest of the world. That is
doing a lot now, right?
Not be taken away from Black folks.
Yeah, but look how the civil rights movement is discussed, right?
Yeah,
I look on social media a lot of times, right, and the civil rights movement is reduced, right, to "we shall overcome."
Right, exactly.
And the courage that it took. I think oftentimes about the freedom riders that were 14 years old, 13 years old, 15 on those buses risking their lives. I don't know if I could have done it. At 13 and 14, taking up the mantle, and that's what it takes, right? But the thing is, right, and as this, and this is the thing when we think about Blackness and politics and whatever else, right, is that the long, and like you said, here's the question that we have that we bring up in academic spaces a lot, and certainly in our social spaces, is that did desegregation, right, come too early, right? When we were I'm just gonna say it, because here, but when we was niggas and we were colored, we owned banks, we owned theaters, we owned all this stuff. Now that we become African American, we don't own nothing. We don't own as much as we did when we were colored. Back when we were colored, right? We don't own as much, and so how and it does bring it out. How are we looking at Blackness in that way, right? And are we aligning it with this notion of assimilation, right? Which you and I both know that you can't fully be assimilated in the culture unless the culture in which you're assimilating into accepts you, right? And we know that's not the case. I mean, the Amy Cooper case
have to be made for that to happen.
Yeah,
concessions have to be, because it can happen. But the concessions that have to be made.
Yeah.
In order for that to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw somebody, and we're gonna wrap this up because we're a little bit over. But I said that Kamala Harris wasn't electable. I did not say that. See, that's what I'm talking about. What I said is, with all the qualifications that she had, people still tore her apart, and she was no longer a viable candidate. She was canceled. She couldn't raise enough money, and so she had to get out of the race.
Yeah.
All right, so I don't think she's not electable. I think she's an outstanding candidate. I think we have some outstanding candidates in the Democratic primary. We do need to eventually answer that question. What are we actually looking for?
Yeah.
So that we can use our cultural and political power and our Blackness, since it's going to be politicized, use it in a way so that we can have candidates that we're interested in and that are electable, if that's a criteria for you.
Right. What do we want?
And what do we want? And how do we move away from reductionist thinking, particularly in the pop cultural space? How do we move away from that? I want, and my producer is like, please take more questions. All right, you got 15 more minutes, Mark. You got 15 minutes. All right, cool.
Quarantine.
All right. Oh my God, you're in quarantine and you wear a mask outside when you're
Yes,
outside.
I do.
Biden has never voted on behalf of anyone different from. Okay, if you have questions. Oh, so while plantation, I'm writing in Cynthia McKinney for president. Oh, okay. So you're writing in Cynthia McKinney for president. There are people who are talking about those savior votes. Is that what it was called? In which they are going to write in someone else other than Biden because they can't possibly bring themselves to vote for Biden and they won't be voting for Trump.
Now, how does that help?
Can you follow up with your statement with a response, please? Yeah, because I don't know. I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, how does that help to write someone else in? Because, doesn't a write-in?
This kind of goes back to the House Blacks and Field Blacks. What defines who is truly Black and who's going to do right by the Blacks in America? That's by, I think it's Devin or Devon, Brian George, Almodovar. My emphasis on the syllables is always wrong. I promise. I have to practice a lot, so don't judge me for my mispronunciation. My best friend Donna White is sitting at home laughing hysterically at me right now because it is something I've done my entire life. Okay, Mark Cunningham. So, I mean, what do you think about that comment, that statement?
Yeah, I mean, right. That's one of the long age-old questions in the Black community too, right? Has been like, Blackness means this, right? It's the very reason why we were scared to tell people, in the 80s, right, when I was coming up, like we were listening to Bon Jovi in the 90s, right? Or we were listening to Madonna, or we were listening to, anything that was not, R&B, 90s, hip hop, whatever. And we weren't listening, so it's this whole, that's been an age-old question, right? And the thing is, again, I go back to what I said prior, right, about this kind of monolithic Blackness, right? Mm-hmm. We're so varied and we're so different, right? And because of that, right, we're going to want different things, and there are going to be different things that of interest to us, whatever else. But we do need to kind of get on some kind of similar page, right, when we start kind of thinking about these things politically, and not just kind of pandering to what seems to be the right thing to say on social media so we can get the number of likes that we want, or we can get the number of retweets that we want, and all this other stuff, right? That we do need to research, that we do need to kind of have, for lack of a better word, right? I'm thinking like town hall meetings, I guess, whatever. Black folk town hall meetings. I don't know. That's a joke, but I mean, that's really a joke. But I mean, having these spaces where we can kind of discuss what it is that we want.
Okay. Mediocre white men will always beat exceptional Black women until we work to dismantle the racist and patriarchal systems and structures that we all live in and support. Yeah, I don't think anybody has an argument with that. Any thinking person has an argument with that. But I do think that the point in terms of mediocrity being the rule in these particular spaces, and the ability for, like our president to fail up of the United States with his professional record and background and all the lawsuits, aside from all the other things, that he's accused of doing and it did do, and was captured on video and audio tape doing and saying. How on earth you get to be president and you don't show your tax returns? I have no idea.
Right.
That would never happen to. I mean, let Obama, former President Obama, have said, "Nah, you can't see my tax returns." I feel certain that they would have found a way to get him out of office.
Obama would never have been able to have done a fraction.
You can't assume the office and you won't give us your tax returns. We can't have that. But this whole idea of Blackness and questioning what it is and what it means and what it looks like, and then these ways in which people want to exercise or demonstrate. The American stereotype of Blackness is another example of us not knowing who we really are. Bobby Jackson, that's my NU classmate and my friend. Bo. And you're right. Stereotypes are cultural shorthand, right? That's what we call them in academia. And stereo means one, and type means typical, right? Category. If you break down the word. And so a lot of times stereotypes emerge or evolve out of what people perceive other people who are empowered to define others perceive to be certain characteristics, behavioral, physical, or what have you. And so a lot of that is internalized, right? Because we are exposed to it in so many ways, especially on social media. In this contemporary day and age. And not to demonize social media. I live in social media. I work in social media, so I don't have an issue with social media per se, but I do have an issue with the mountain of misinformation that's out there. So when we think about Blackness, Mark, I think you're right about that. And when you brought up segregation, it made me think we all had one agenda then, that was freedom.
Yeah.
Right? We all had one thing we were after. But now that we have been living in a very different time, a different place historically, paragraphs I can't work with. I need you to send me like a question.
Yeah.
I don't.
Just to kind of condense him where he's saying here too, like, yeah, Barack Obama was not able to be all things to all people.
Right, exactly.
And again, once again, as a black man, I think it's the same thing that you kind of were saying about Kamala Harris. No matter what Obama did, he's gonna piss somebody off.
Right, exactly.
Black, white, whereas a white guy was gonna please somebody.
Right.
In comparison, right? Or certainly was gonna get the same pushback, right? But the thing is, and that's because, right, when you're a person of color, right, I don't think you a lot of times expect anything out of the white.
Yes, yeah.
But when there's a candidate of color, then you expect everything from them.
Yes.
They can't deliver that. They can't deliver everything. They have to play the game because there is a game to be played.
Right. And if you're interested, there are third-party candidates. Cynthia McKinney is not one of them. There are third-party candidates that you can actually support. But people don't want to do the work of building a real third party on either side or in the middle. They don't. Even the people who are have the greatest possibility of accomplishing or achieving a third party that can really go toe to toe with the Democrats and the Republicans, they don't want to invest in it. It's too difficult in their minds, even though it has to be done and eventually will be done. Right? It's going to have to do because this two-party system is obviously not working for a lot of people, not just Black Americans. Right. So we're going to wrap up.
Can I say something you said about when you were talking about Charlamagne really quickly?
Yeah, because that's the last statement. Yes.
Yeah, I think let's be for real about that too. Charlamagne set Joe Biden up in a lot of ways, the way he asked that question.
Yeah.
Charlamagne is not a fan of Joe Biden anyway. He admitted to him at the beginning of the interview that he was critical of him, and he has been. But the thing is that the way that you asked that question and the way Joe Biden responded to that question, the way you posed it to him.
Yes.
And and I'm not sticking up for him, but I'm just saying.
Oh no! So this is my thing. In my favorite movie, The Spook Who Sat by the Door, there's a line where Dan Freeman says, "The revolution is going to jump." You mean to tell me the revolution is going to jump off of a junkie?
Yeah.
So when I see all of this, like I wake up and I see all of this stuff. And my cousin Tanisha was the one who was like, "Have you looked at your Twitter or Facebook? Because it is jumping." I see all of this stuff around this particular comment, and I saw the interview because I do watch The Breakfast Club. But I did see the interview, and I was just like, "That was a joke." I didn't think anything of it after he said it.
Yeah,
I was like, "Oh, Joe's tripping, haha," and then went on with my life. So I didn't even think I needed to write about it or to address it or to talk about it or things of that nature because I was like, oh, this is a distraction. Like we need to focus on what's really important, Black. Thank you, Terry. Terry said, thank you for discussing important issues.
Just a question about what vice presidential candidate do you think has the opportunity? I mean, that will be the best running mate for him. There you go. Yeah, that Jessica.
Oh, Jessica. I like, well, I won't say this. I think out of his options, he's looking at Elizabeth Warren. I think out of the options, he's looking at, I would like to see him come with I hate the term dark horse because it's such a racist term, but somebody who we haven't seen in a long time. I want to see Castro. I mean, I would like to see.
I was mad at him because of the way he treated Biden.
Yeah. I loved it. I was like, I mean, and that's what's crazy. I'm like a sellout because I was like, I didn't even support Biden. How am I a sellout? But I would love to see Castro on the ticket. I would like to see Cory Booker on the ticket. I mean, I know that's not going to happen because people don't.
But he's already he's already limited and put his foot in his mouth. I guess arguably, right? He's going to have to do a woman. He's going to have to pick a woman.
Yeah, because he's already said that he would. So
he said he would.
And I support women. I'm not one of those women who don't want to see no other women in charge, whatever. I just don't want to see another Black woman picked apart and beaten up. And even though she's gonna be vice president, y'all know who they're gonna come for.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm just not with it. So, that's just me. I'm gonna support whoever. I don't give a damn, honestly, who Biden has as his running mate. I mean, I'm not voting for Trump, so I am voting. Not happily. I'm not gonna be skipping to the polls. I'm not
exactly. This is gonna be a duty.
I'll be like, oh my Lord, okay. Me and my mother, we went to battle over Biden. We almost broke up our family over Biden. No, never, because she's my heart. But we battled like for weeks over Biden. Battled.
I don't want to see Michelle Obama because I'm tired of them calling her apes. I'm just getting mad. I'm sick of that.
No, see, this is the thing. People are okay with Black women until we get to a certain position.
Yeah.
And it's like we aren't nothing or anything. And then it's often men, and sometimes our men, who are leading the charge. And I'm just like, I'm not with it. I'm like, let these folks, they've created this nonsense that's in the White House. I'm not convinced. I don't want my sisters to go up in that White House and be mistreated and abused.
Exactly.
Scapegoated and dogs and shamed. I don't want that. So I'm like, nope. So
I don't want it either.
I'll go for whomever he chooses, but I don't want that for me. I don't want, when I see another Black woman, I see me. I'm like, I don't want that for us. And I'm like, they made the mess, let them clean it up themselves. We tired of cleaning up after white folks. I said it. So in conclusion, thank you, Dr. Mark Cunningham. See, Mark can do that. Biden cannot. Those are the rules, people. The unwritten rules. You know what they are. Stop playing. You know what the rules are. You know what the rules are. So I'd like to thank Dr. Mark Cunningham for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, man.
I had a lively conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, and we will see you on Friday. I got a show. We're gonna switch gears a little bit and talk about Black mental health.
Here though, but I did talk about that a little bit in my dissertation though. But
well, you definitely tune in and
I'll tune in.
Black mental health. Of course, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So we're going to talk about that with two dynamic psychologists from Clark Atlanta University, Dr. Lisa Bell and Dr. Jimmy Davis. So tune in on Friday. I can't remember the time. I think it's at 11. But we'll advertise. We'll put it out there. You'll know. So come back and talk to us about that. But thank you so much, Dr. Cunningham. This was
thank you, Dr. Burton.
Yes.
Sarah. Thank you, Sarah.
Oh, all right, Frat. And so please stay safe. Stay clean. My best friend laughs at me when I say that, but I mean it. Stay clean.
Yes. Wash your hands.
And wear your masks. All right. We'll see you later.